I was standing at the bathroom mirror, trying to get the clasp on my necklace to cooperate, when my phone lit up on the counter. I assumed it was my brother texting to ask if I was bringing dessert. That was the kind of person he had always been, the one who remembered to ask about dessert while forgetting everything that actually mattered. But the name on the screen wasn't my brother's. It was my coworker, Janet, a woman I had known for 11 years, a woman who delivered bad news the way a surgeon delivers a scalpel, clean, direct, without apology. The message was 5 words: "Do not go there tonight." I set the necklace down on the counter. My fingers had gone cold. I called her back before the screen even dimmed. She picked up on the first ring, and her voice was not the voice of someone who had texted the wrong person by accident. It was low, controlled, the way people talk when they are standing outside a burning building and trying not to cause a stampede. "Listen to me," she said. "I need you to sit down, and I need you to not say anything until I finish. Can you do that?" I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. "I was processing a title search this afternoon," she said. "Routine work, client bought a property, I pull the chain of ownership, standard procedure. And I found something attached to your mother's estate. A document I have never seen before. A durable power of attorney, transferring full legal and financial control of everything in your mother's name over to your brother. Effective 2 weeks ago." She paused. "It was notarized by Gerald Holt." I knew that name. Gerald Holt had been our family's notary for 20 years. He had stamped my mother's original will, her property deeds, her healthcare directive. "Okay," I said slowly. "And?" "Gerald Holt died in February," Janet said. I checked the obituary. Stroke. He passed on February 9th. This document is dated April 3rd. The bathroom tiles were very cold under my feet. I noticed that suddenly, the way you notice small physical things when the larger world stops making sense. "The signature is forged," I said, not a question. "The signature is forged," she confirmed. "And that's not the worst part. There's a secondary filing attached. An emergency petition for a guardianship review, citing evidence of financial instability and cognitive decline. The petitioner is your brother." Another pause. "There's a psychiatric evaluation attached. It's dated last month. The therapist's name is Dr. Carol Whitmore." I looked her up. "She is not licensed in this state." I was quiet for a long time. "Before you go anywhere tonight," Janet said, "you need to understand what that dinner is. It's not a family dinner. It's a setup." I told her I would call her back. I set the phone down on the counter next to the necklace I had not managed to fasten. I looked at my reflection. I looked the same as I always did. Tired, maybe, a little drawn around the eyes. The way you look when you have spent 2 years managing a parent's illness and then a parent's death and then the hollow aftermath of both. I did not look incompetent. I did not look like someone who needed to be managed. But I was beginning to understand that what I looked like was not the point. The point was what a carefully assembled folder of documents could make me look like to a judge who had never met me. Before I tell you what I found when I started pulling that thread, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I want to know how far this reaches. I did not drive to my brother's house that evening. Instead, I drove to Janet's. She had printed everything and spread it across her kitchen table under the overhead light. The way you lay out a jigsaw puzzle when you are trying to understand the shape of something before you have all the pieces. She handed me a mug of coffee and stood beside me while I read. The petition was 12 pages long. It cited a pattern of erratic financial decisions, missed obligations, and emotional instability following the death of our mother. It referenced 3 specific incidents as supporting evidence: an outburst at our mother's memorial service, where I had allegedly screamed at family members and had to be escorted outside; a series of emails I had supposedly sent to my brother in the weeks after the funeral, rambling and incoherent, asking for money; and a report from a neighbor claiming I had appeared on my front lawn at 2 a.m. in apparent distress, disoriented, unable to identify myself to the responding officer. I read each one twice. The memorial service incident I remembered clearly because nothing had happened. I had stood by the casket and spoken quietly with my aunt for 40 minutes, and then helped carry flowers to the car. There had been no outburst. There had been no escort. The emails I did not remember sending because I had not sent them, but the format looked exactly like my email client. The font, the signature block, the small green dot next to my name. Someone who had access to my account could have drafted them. Someone who had lived in this house with me for 3 months after the funeral and had used my laptop while his own was being repaired. The neighbor's report I read 3 times. It described a woman matching my description, late 20s, brown hair, appearing confused on the front lawn of the address listed. The responding officer had noted that the subject was unable to provide her name when asked and had to be assisted back inside by a male companion. I had never had a male companion. I lived alone. I had lived alone for 4 years. But my brother had a key. He had asked for one during my mother's illness, in case of emergencies. I had given it to him without hesitation, because that is what you do for family. He's been building this for months, I said. Janet nodded. She was leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, watching me read. The question is why now? What triggered the timeline? I thought about the appraisal notice I had received 3 weeks ago. A letter from the county assessor's office, informing me that our mother's home had been reassessed at current market value. The house I had grown up in, the house she had lived in for 31 years, the house I had been slowly working toward keeping, was now assessed at $940,000. I had mentioned it to my brother over the phone, casually. The way you mention something to the only other person in the world who understands what a house means when the person who lived in it is gone. He had said, that's something, and then changed the subject. The house, I said. Janet's expression confirmed it. The estate had not been fully settled. Our mother had died without a clear directive on the property, and my brother and I had been in a loose holding pattern, both of us paying into maintenance costs, both of us nominally in agreement that we would figure it out eventually. There was no urgency. There was no conflict. We were grieving people who had agreed, without ever saying it directly, to leave the difficult thing alone until we had the capacity to face it. But $940,000 had apparently given my brother the capacity to face it. If he could have me declared legally incapacitated, even temporarily, even just long enough for a conservatorship to be granted, he would control the estate. He would control the house. He could list it, sell it, and move the money before I could challenge a single document in court. He had used our mother's death to study me. He had taken notes on my grief, and then he had handed those notes to a lawyer and built a cage out of them. I closed the folder. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me. I had expected to feel afraid, or devastated, or the particular nausea of betrayal. But what I felt instead was something colder and more precise. The same thing I feel at work when a chain of title doesn't add up and I know that somewhere in the paperwork, someone made a mistake they cannot take back. Okay, I said. He wants a paper war. Let's look at every piece of paper. I started with the emails. My brother had set up a shared family account 3 years ago during our mother's first hospitalization. The idea was that we could both monitor her insurance claims and medical correspondence without having to forward things back and forth. It had seemed practical at the time. It had seemed like the kind of thing a responsible adult child does. He still had access. It had never occurred to me to revoke it because it had never occurred to me that I was living next to someone who was cataloging my vulnerabilities. I logged into my personal email on Janet's laptop. The emails the petition referenced were in my sent folder. They were dated over 3 consecutive weeks, sent late at night, addressed to my brother. The tone was fragmented and desperate. They referenced money I did not need and fears I did not have. One of them mentioned hearing voices. I looked at the metadata. They had been sent from my account. But the sending device was logged as a desktop computer with an IP address I did not recognize. I pulled up the location on a search tool. The IP address resolved to a neighborhood 2 miles from my house. My brother's neighborhood. He had not broken into my email account. He had never needed to. He had used the access I gave him freely and willingly. The access I gave him in a hospital waiting room while our mother was having a cardiac evaluation, because I trusted him, and I was frightened, and all I wanted was to not be alone in something enormous. I took screenshots. I saved the metadata to a document. I labeled it clearly. Then I moved on to the neighbor's report. The responding officer's name was listed in the petition. I searched the precinct database, which was publicly available. There was no call logged to my address on the date in question. Not that night, not the night before, not that week. The officer whose name appeared in the report had filed for early retirement 8 months ago and was no longer active with the department. My brother had found a retired officer willing to put his name on a fictional incident report, or he had fabricated the report entirely and gambled that no one would check. I checked, I documented, I moved on. The psychiatric evaluation was the last piece and the easiest to unravel. Dr. Carol Whitmore had a professional website and a listed address, both in a state 400 miles away. Her licensure was valid in that state. It was not valid here. Any evaluation she had conducted in this jurisdiction was legally inadmissible. More importantly, any attorney who had submitted that evaluation to a local court while knowing it lacked local licensure had committed a very specific and very serious kind of misconduct. By 2 in the morning, I had a counterfile that was twice as thick as my brother's petition. I was going to need help finishing it. The help arrived the next afternoon in the form of my aunt, my mother's younger sister. She was 71 years old. She had been a paralegal for 30 years before she retired, and she had the kind of sharp, patient intelligence that people mistake for gentleness because it never raises its voice. She called me, which surprised me, because I had not told her anything yet. "I need to come over," she said. "I have something your brother doesn't know I have." She arrived with a cardboard box she had kept in her attic for 16 years. Inside was a copy of every document our mother had ever signed in my aunt's presence, organized by year, with handwritten notes in the margins. Our aunt had been our mother's de facto executor in the years before any of this was formally settled. She had kept copies of everything, including the original durable power of attorney drafted 14 years ago, assigning authority to me, not to my brother. That document had been signed, witnessed, and notarized by Gerald Holt, when Gerald Holt was very much alive. His signature was on the original. His notary stamp was on the original. His license number was on the original. The document my brother had filed with the court had the same notary stamp, the same license number, the same signature block, but the date was April 3rd. And Gerald Holt had been in the ground since February. "He didn't know I had this," my aunt said. She set the box on my kitchen table with the quiet certainty of someone placing the final piece of evidence into an envelope. He never thought to ask. I looked at her for a moment. I thought about my mother's handwriting in the margins of the documents my aunt had preserved. The careful, looping letters of a woman who had believed that paperwork mattered, that signatures meant something, that the things you put your name to were permanent. She had put her name on a document 14 years ago that said she trusted me. My brother had put her notary's stamp on a lie. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to be honest with me." My aunt looked at me without flinching. "Did you know he was capable of this?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I knew he was capable of wanting things that were not his. I did not know he was capable of this." She folded her hands on the table. "Your mother knew. That's why she signed that document when she did." I called an attorney that evening, a real one, locally licensed, who specialized in estate fraud. He had the counter petition ready to file within 48 hours. What happened next, I was not prepared for. On the morning my attorney filed the counter petition, my brother was hosting a dinner party. I found out about it through a mutual cousin who texted me a photo from across town, a long table of people who had known our family for decades, my brother standing at the head of it, holding a glass of wine, laughing. The cousin's message said, "He told everyone you've been struggling, that he's been trying to help you, that tonight is a celebration, because things are almost resolved." I read that message sitting in my attorney's parking lot, and I felt something clarify in my chest, like a lens snapping into focus. He had already told the story. He had already written me out of it, cast himself as the long-suffering sibling who had stepped in to manage a difficult situation and invited an audience to watch the curtain call. I texted the cousin back. I said, "Don't leave. Keep your phone on." At 7:42 that evening, while my brother was giving what my cousin later described as a very moving speech about family responsibility and difficult decisions, 2 investigators from the county district attorney's office and a representative from the state bar arrived at the restaurant. The charges included filing a fraudulent legal instrument, conspiracy to commit estate fraud, unauthorized use of a deceased official's notary credentials, and suborning a false official report. My cousin sent me a video. It was 11 seconds long. It showed my brother's face at the exact moment the investigators introduced themselves. The glass of wine was still in his hand. He had built a story so carefully, so methodically, polishing every detail for an audience he had hand-selected, and the audience had a front-row seat to the part of the story he had not written. My attorney negotiated the outcome over the following 3 months. The fraudulent power of attorney was voided. The original document, the one my mother had signed 14 years ago with a notary who was actually alive, was entered into the record. The conservatorship petition was dismissed with prejudice, which means it cannot be refiled. My brother pleaded guilty to 2 counts of document fraud and 1 count of filing a false report. He was sentenced to 18 months and ordered to pay restitution. His attorney, who had submitted the invalid psychiatric evaluation without disclosing the licensure issue, was referred to the state bar for disciplinary review. My aunt and I settled the estate together over the following spring. The house is mine now. I pay the property taxes. I cut the grass on the same schedule my mother always kept. I have not changed the kitchen, because I am not ready to change the kitchen yet. and I have decided that is a thing I am allowed to take time on. My brother sent a letter from the facility where he is completing his sentence. I read it once and set it in a drawer. I am not ready for that conversation, and I have decided that is also a thing I'm allowed to take time on. What I keep coming back to, in the quiet of the house that smells like the same wood polish it has always smelled like, is the moment I sat on the edge of my bathtub with a phone in my hand and decided not to go to dinner. It was such a small decision. Put the necklace down. Make the call. Stay still for a moment, instead of walking forward on autopilot. The most dangerous thing my brother counted on was my trust. He counted on me to show up when invited, to assume good faith because I had always assumed good faith, to walk into a room he had arranged because he was family and family does not arrange rooms. He was right that I had always been that person. He was wrong to assume I would always be. Here is the thing no one tells you about people who build elaborate traps out of forged documents and borrowed credibility. They are not as intelligent as the trap makes them look. They are simply more willing than you are to spend months on a lie. And the moment you match their patience with your own, the moment you slow down and look at every piece of paper the way they looked at every piece of paper, the architecture of the trap becomes visible. And once you can see it, you can see exactly where it was always going to fall. My mother used to say that the truth is not louder than a lie. It is just older. And in the end, old things outlast fast ones. She had a notary stamp on a document that said she believed that. She was right.